Hello. Oh my god. Okay, so this video, taboos, the collective shadow, the dark occult. I'm just going to be touching on these things because I feel like I've been witnessing a lot of stuff, okay, over the past couple of weeks. I've been witnessing, I would say couple of weeks to a month. I've just been witnessing so much stuff surrounding this, and I feel that it's really important to talk about this. It's really important to have an open dialogue about these uncomfortable topics, because if we don't, then where are we and what are we doing? You know, where are we moving as a collective when we're unable to discuss the things which are painful or uncomfortable or reflect our traumas back to us? You know, where are we? And so, as I said, the last couple of weeks, this stuff has just been getting thrown in my face, like in a big way. And I could see that a lot of it is related to, it's challenging me to step into greater integrity as a healer. It's challenging me to go, okay, well, how do I want to practice as a healer? How do I want to share my gifts with the world? How do I want to show up in healing spaces? How do I want to show up just in the world as I am, as myself? And what I kind of realized was that part of my shadow that was being reflected back to me was, not wanting to rock the boat, not wanting to come across like I'm attacking people, not wanting to come across like I'm gonna, what I'm gonna say is gonna hurt people or any of that kind of stuff. And that's my Libra rising coming out, okay? I'm a Pisces sun. But I also have an Aries moon. And if you're attuned to astrology at all, then you'll know that, Aries moon were warriors. And I, my background prior to really deeply stepping into my healing work professionally was a poet. And if you know me from my poetry days, then you will know that my poetry did not shy away from the taboo. It never ever did. I always said things as I saw them, and I think that is something that I wouldn't say that I lost, but I think it's something that, in terms of how I was showing up in certain spaces, I didn't necessarily want to be perceived as somebody who was sharing things, that could be perceived as sort of removing the illusions from people, and what I kind of had to realize was, like, actually sometimes that's really needed. Sometimes that's really, really, really needed, is to be a disruptor. There's nothing wrong with that archetype, and it's one that's kind of followed me throughout my life. And that's fine, that sort of Heyoka archetype, that's totally okay. It's okay to be that, it's just sometimes it can be, it brings stuff up in you, and especially when you're somebody that likes harmony and all of that kind of stuff. It is also witnessing that, like, conflict, there's nothing wrong with conflict. Conflict's amazing because it allows us to go, it calls us deeper into going, okay, well, how do we bring harmony to this? What do we need to unpack? What do we need to look at? What do we need to release? And, as a young person, I was always really drawn to the taboo. My favorite book when I was young, it was called, like, 20 Greatest Mysteries of the Greatest Mysteries of the 20th Century, and it was literally like my Bible. Like, I love things that are weird. Like, I love weirdness, like I want to understand it more and delve into it and talk about it. And, any of my friends, they know that that's that's me. And I think that I had kind of maybe dimmed that in myself a little bit in certain spaces. And, especially when it came to talking about shadow government, when it came to talking about, dare I say it, anything to do with, like, the C word, the V word, if you know what I'm talking about, 2020, right? Any of that kind of stuff, I'd kind of felt like, okay, I need to back off from this a little bit. And I think that was important for me at that time. I had a really rude awakening when I was 17, and it was really difficult because nobody knew what the fuck was going on with me, and neither did I. And nobody around me understood, and it was a really challenging time. And around the age of sort of 19, I would say I really started to get into research, intuitive research around the dark occult. And I mean, listen, I could talk for hours because I've researched this stuff very, very heavily because I find it fascinating. I want to know about what's going on. Especially at that time, I really wanted to understand the world around me, and from that, understand myself on a deeper level. And that's such an important part of this awakening process, is a deeper understanding of, okay, maybe my politicians aren't telling me the truth about certain things, and actually maybe they're up to some really dark practices, you know. And that can be a lot for people because it sort of shatters your reality, you know. And so I see a lot of people that have maybe been awakening in the past couple of years that are kind of stuck in that love and light thing, you know, of just like, oh, well, it's all just love and light, and they turn or they shy away from certain things, you know, which are kind of necessary for us to know if we're really going to step into our sovereignty. If we're really serious about being sovereign human beings who are totally in control and responsible for our own emotional processes, our own, you know, all of our bodies, if you will, our physical, our mental, emotional, spiritual bodies, because that's what true sovereignty is, right? Then you have to understand the world around you, and you have to understand how it is always going to reflect something back to you about yourself. All of the lower impulses, everybody has them. There's no point pretending that people don't have them. You know, that's why there are so many myths and so many legends around slaying the dragon, because what it means is harnessing, gaining control over those lower impulses, right? So that they do not control us. That's what all these myths and legends about slaying the dragon are, about going into, you know, a cave or a forest or whatever and slaying a beast. It's the beast is us, it's within you, you know? And so when I see, you know, people that are really unwilling to look at shadow government, that are really unwilling to look at things that could be considered conspiratorial, what I see is somebody that's afraid of themselves, that hasn't looked at their own shadow and how that plays out for them, you know? And I think it's really, really important to have these conversations around that, you know, because everything is always a reflection. Everything is always reflecting something back to us deeper about ourselves. And when we come to understand the deeper meanings behind the dark occult and their agenda, all of it is about cloaking. All of it is around hoodwinking. It's around deception. You know, if you do not sit in your crown, right, somebody else is going to sit there for you. And so if you're not aware of those higher spiritual processes and how they're affecting you, and how there are certain rituals and very like intentional uses of words and these sorts of things, and how they're impacting your reality, then you very much like give up your power unconsciously, you know. And I think because so many people haven't been attuned to spirituality, they haven't been aware of the way that those spiritual forces affect us, the way that we are cyclical spiritual beings, and how the cycles and the seasons very much affect us, then, you know, there's only going to be less of an ability to understand that other people might be doing that. Other people might be using those cycles and seasons. Other people might be using certain specific dates. Other people might be using all of these black magic practices. You know, numerology, like everything has its light and has its shadow. It's just a tool. It can be used just like astrology. All of these things can be used to manipulate and used to exert control in the subtle realms, in the astral world, you know. And so that's why I say it's like be very discerning over what you are consuming. You know, there's a lot of films and TV shows, like I don't watch I don't watch films or TV. Very, very rarely. I'll occasionally watch a film if I'm on a plane, if I'm on a long plane ride. And even then, you know, I think that, you know, there's so many quotes out there from people who say, don't watch TV because it clouds your third eye. There's truth to that. There is truth to that, because it prevents you from being able to discern what is fantasy and what is reality. You know, it's like if you're binge watching Netflix shows 12 hours a day, I guarantee you it's going to be harder for you when you watch a politician on the television. It's going to be harder for you to know when they're lying to you, because your head's filled with drama anyway, you know? So it's things like that that are like those kind of hypnotic states, trance states that we get put in when we watch TV, when we get fed all of these subliminal messages through advertising, through different television shows, etc., that affect our ability to discern what's actually happening in the wider world around us, you know? And I do understand it's like these conversations can be difficult. We don't want to believe that the people who are in power, they're not really in power. They want to be in power, right? That they have these really dark, nefarious intentions against the people, because it's frightening. It's frightening it can strike fear within us to think that that is actually what is happening. But it's really important. I feel like that's key word of this of this thing is important. It is really important to recognize that, because then we have a choice. Then we have a choice whether we unplug from that, you know? And I see a lot of people in the sort of spiritual communities that want to have that sort of childlike innocence and purity as their sort of main, almost like personality, you know? And it's like that's okay, right? But, you know, there is a difference between the light of a child, right? A child has just this pure light because, yeah, they might have their heavy Akashic past life stuff, but in this life, they're untouched, you know? They have this beautiful childlike light around them, you know, children do, you know, up until generally a certain age, right? And they have this innocence, they have this purity, and that's a beautiful thing, but it's also not earned. It is just who they are. It's just part of the light that they hold. There's a very big difference between that light and alchemical light, which comes from deep alchemical processes like facing your shadow, overcoming those lower impulses, overcoming the lower chakras, right? That's a different kind of light. That light is powerful, you know? And so there's a difference between those different forms of archetypal light, and that's just something that is, I think people can struggle to witness fully, the difference between those things, you know? And we all have a shadow, we all have multiple different shadows. Everything is made up of shadow and light, you know? And I don't know if there ever gets a point where like our shadow work is over, our shadow work is complete. But I would say that, you know, it's a continual spiraling, unfolding process, and that it's really key to, you know, in order to kind of witness it and face it, is that, you know, if your shadow will always be getting reflected back to you. So if someone talks about something and you're like, I don't want to hear that, don't talk about that, you know, it's going, okay, what is that reflecting back to me? What is there something about myself that I'm not able to witness, you know? And as somebody who has looked into this stuff for the last 10 years, yes, some of it is really horrifying, you know? It's not nice, but it's also really empowering to know that that's what's happening in the world, you know, and that that's what's actually going on. And so I think my message for this video is just like, don't shy away from these topics, because you do yourself a disservice. You know, I'm not saying that everybody has to go and spend the next 10 years researching this stuff. That's not what I'm saying. But if it comes to you and you can't hold it in your field, it's reflecting something back to you about yourself. And if you really want to be sovereign, you really want to embody those sovereignty templates, which are like paramount for, you know, what we might term the new earth, which are paramount for being able to access those higher levels of consciousness. You know, it's like you have to be able to face that. You have to be able to face your shadow, because otherwise you're only going to plug in to, you're not going to be able to rise higher than the lower astral, than the lower 4D, which is false light stuff. It's not actual true divine light. And so to be able to access those higher levels of ourselves, we have to face those shadow aspects. We have to look at them in the face, sit with them, integrate them, and just acknowledge that that is what exists within us, you know? And I think it's really interesting that, you know, we're coming out of this age of, coming out of a dark age, you know, and yet that's what people are so afraid to face, is the darkness, you know? And I think that what happens as you allow yourself to face that is you lose that fear. Nothing's frightening anymore, because it's like, you know what's going on, you know the horrors of the world, you know, so you're not running from it anymore. You're just going, well, yeah, I accept that this is what's going on, and you know, and I'm gonna make my choices surrounding that. It's our choices. It's our choices, you know. It's not, we do not know the light we can emit until we have looked at our shadow. It's impossible. You will never know how bright you can fucking shine until you have gone to the depths of your darkness, until you have been dragged into your own underworld with that shit that you just don't want to look at. And that's what I say to people, because it's like I see my clients come to me and it's like they're in these bubbles, they're in total bubbles of like, you know, and I'm just trying to keep positive, I'm just trying to think positive. And I'm like, you don't need to think positive. You need to face your shadow, you know? See that thing that you're ignoring, that's what you need to look at. That's what's gonna create those shifts for you, you know? And as well, it's like, it upsets me. It's like, because I see people that they feel like, oh, I don't wanna be negative. I don't want to be negative. And it's like, you're not being negative. You're not, so what if you're being negative? Who cares? You know, that's okay. So show up as you are. Even if you're feeling that way, let's talk about it. Let's work through it, you know, but don't hide from it. And I think that's the problem, is that there's a lot of healers out there. There's a lot of people that claim to be that sort of guru kind of archetype, and they're not talking about the shadow. They're not talking about what's really going on in the world. They're actually feeding into celebrity culture, which is, if you want to talk about something being satanic or any of that, you know, it's celebrity culture, you know, and there's people that are feeding into that. So I could keep talking about this. If you want a part 2, let me know. I could go a lot deeper with this stuff, but I just felt like this was just really important, just to put this out there. You know, it's like, it's not a negative thing to face your darkness. It's the most powerful thing you can do. It's alchemy, you know, that's true change, right? And then, you know, the last thing I'll say as well is, like, when you are faced with a choice, you know, and you choose to shift out of that shadow, you choose to integrate it, that's where you see that just the most magnificent change. But you can't do that until you face it. So thank you so much. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Let me know how it lands with you, and take care.